1984 was that movie?
I just looked it up. It was 86.
86. Okay.
Yeah. And I only looked it up because I was trying to figure out where else Judd Nelson
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? Okay, my guy's on. I think we're good to go. We're
right.
recording now.
We're
so,
recording now? Okay,
yeah. What's up, dudes? Welcome to this will be episode 4 of our recollection. I'm here with Jeff,
Hello, everybody.
and I'm Mike, and welcome to week 4. Before we get to the news of what we just did, which is we watched the 1986 classic Transformers the movie, which I've never even heard of before. Wanted to give a quick announcement that Jeff and I both will be at the Como
Retro
Retro
Con.
Con, which will be at Stony Creek April 15th.
April 22nd will be.
April
22nd.
April 22nd?
April 22nd. It'll be on
April
Saturday.
22nd, Saturday.
So this is the second year that they've actually been able to do this. Last year we had it last year, and it became a really good. It was a really good turnout. I have a friend of mine that we actually ran a booth last year, and we did phenomenally well. So they are doing it again this year. The family that put it up last year are doing it again this year. It's going to be way more extravagant, I guess. There was a lot of people that turned out. So me and my friend that we were, Brian, who I work with last year with this, we're doing it again this year. We're going to have a really decent booth. We both loved it, and we got looking forward to it. And I actually have talked to my partner here on trying to get on. So he's going to be DJing. So go ahead.
Yeah, so Drop the Mic DJ Service is my wedding business company. I've been doing it for a few years, and I reached out mostly because I like to do a few volunteer things with the business, and I was like, you know what, it's a win-win is I get to volunteer my time but also get into the con. So win-win for me. So I'll be doing all of the music, and hopefully I don't think we'll be breaking any rules, but just we'll muddle out the details just to make sure, but we'll hopefully be able to do a show there as well.
Yeah, we're going to try to do some like live commentary while we're there, to kind of record on site. Maybe get some people that actually were there last year and this year. Maybe just kind of have them sit down with us and talk to us about their passion and how they got in the game and collecting and what they think and everything. I think it'll be a really good turnout like it was last year. So we're both really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be really exciting. And so be sure to follow Columbia RetroCon on Facebook. I don't know if I'm assuming they're on Instagram as well, but just check out for their socials. But on Facebook is where I know they'll be. And speaking of Facebook, at this time, our Facebook will be live. So if you're listening to this episode now, I waited a few weeks to kind of get some traction, but our Facebook group should be live, so you can make discussions on there, share awesome collections that you've gotten and everything like that. You can also hit us up on our Discord and all that fun stuff. But yeah.
So yeah, feel free to get on that on Facebook and share pictures of your collection or your prized jewels. A lot of people are very proud of their collection, so we definitely would like to see people would post their stuff if you want to share it with everybody else, and we'd be more than happy to take a look and post comments or whatever.
I love that. Yeah.
So.
Okay, great. Now that we got the housekeeping out of the way and the good news on that, Transformers the movie. Wow. So I've never. Jeff was talking to me about this movie probably back in episode 1 maybe, and I had never even realized that they made an animated film like a AAA animated film with great voice acting that came out in theater. You hear a lot about movies from the 80s for toy lines or cartoon series and things like that come out on TV or straight to video or something like that. But this was in theater. Jeff got to go as a kid, watch this in the theater, and seeing it kind of in a theater experience here in my own home was fantastic. The music was insane. It was so 80s. It really was. It did not disappoint at all in that aspect. There were a couple parts of, because I'm not super familiar with Gen 1 of Transformers. I mean, I've seen it, I've watched it, but it's been years. Probably since Saturday morning cartoons were in my life, since I've watched it. So a couple parts where I was like, I don't know who this character is exactly. And they just, died. So I should probably feel really bad that they died, but I actually don't remember who they are. But other than that, the story was great. I thought it was super well written. The voice acting was incredible. What an incredible cast to have, especially because you could probably tell me, but I don't think a lot of those actors' names that I saw are like in-person film actors and not necessarily voice actors. So that was wild to see.
So when I first watched it back in the early 80s, so this movie came out in 86. So the toy line had like reached its peak with Generation 1 with Optimus Prime and, Bumblebee, any of the old Gen 1, everybody remembers that. So this film, when it first came out, children went to the theater to watch this and were blown back that they watched their favorite Transformers get killed in the first 30 minutes of the film.
Almost immediately.
And Mike was just surprised, like, wow, he said that was fast, So the movie was originally made to be a marketing tool to kind of bring around their second generation of Transformers, Rodimus Prime and stuff. The big thing that happened that made kids cry and leave the theater and stuff was because they like wiped out Optimus Prime. And that was a big, big no-no for us kids because that was like something we looked up to Optimus Prime. That was like our hero,
right?
Autobots, and then they got so much lashback from that. Parents sent in letters and stuff. So in the original cartoon, later when they did introduce the new generation, they actually brought back Optimus Prime because the kids were wanting Optimus Prime, and they did it in a very weird way. I don't want to give out too much for someone that hadn't watched the original cartoon, but definitely check it out.
Okay, yeah, I'll have to like actually watch them bring him back, because when he was on the table in the movie dying, I just kept thinking, I was like, well, Optimus Prime is still like, I remember seeing him in the series post when this movie would have come out. Mm-hmm. So it's like, clearly he's not going to die here. And then all of a sudden he was dead. And I was like, wait, what? So then I kept thinking, I was like, oh, they're going to bring him back towards the end of the movie, or the Matrix that they talked about is like going to somehow bring him back to life. That didn't happen. So, I mean, spoilers, it's only been about 40 years almost since that movie came out, but spoilers if you haven't seen it yet. But yeah, that didn't happen. And it shocked me because I think when I was thinking about it, I saw it's kind of like when I watched Adventure Time. Have you watched through the Adventure Time series?
I have seen some episodes.
Yeah. So Pendleton Ward made this insane kind of connection series that his whole mission was that for the first few seasons of Adventure Time, there was no major devastation to the plot. So not main characters that you really liked passed away or like were gone or whatever. But he understood that the people that would watch Adventure Time would grow with the show. So he made very relatable characters that were like around 10 to 11 years old at the beginning of the series. And towards the end of the series, after kids had gone through puberty, or, when Finn in the show is like 16, 17, 18 years old, towards the end of the actual Adventure Time series, the kids that started watching are also that age. So they kind of grew with the show, and he made it more mature every single season.
Right.
And so then towards the end of the series, there are important characters that die, that disappeared, that you never see again. But he knew that like there were kids that grew up with the show, so they would understand it at that point in time.
Right.
But at the beginning of the show, he didn't do that. And that to me is super fascinating. But with, this, I believe you said this movie came out like right after Generation 1. Mm-hmm. So like kids really hadn't adjusted to like, oh, like our favorite character is going to be dead.
Yeah.
And so I just I can't even imagine the amount of kids that were like, okay, but he's not really dead, right? Like he's coming back.
Yeah, growing up as a kid watching these after school I'd go watch Transformers. You would see them get shot and stuff, and then they come right back. Oh, it's just a scratch. I'm okay. But then I
Right.
watched this animated movie, and then Megatron coming through on the ship, and then basically destroying three guys with like one shot, and their little drop down, and their spark just disappears, and you're like. Okay, they're dead, and you're like, well, they're not coming back. So,
Yeah, there was some real like devastating moments. I mean, if I feel like if I wasn't a 30-year-old man that's been hardened by shows like The Last of Us, which if you haven't watched that, it's absolutely fantastic. But that if I were a kid, I'd be crying. I'd be like, oh my gosh, like my character is just gone, and so quickly too. I
Yeah.
mean, it was just and
I was highly upset when I was a kid when I first watched it, and my uncle was telling me he's like yeah, he's dead and everything. He said I didn't like it either, and then my uncle was a grown man at the time, but he watched it just as hardcore as I did when I was a kid, and then they came out with a new generation of Transformers. With Rodimus Prime being the leader, and then Ultra Magnus and Springer and RC and stuff. You're like some of your old toys. You're like, oh well, darn, well, like, I guess I'll just have to just put up with these new Transformers. And then it's just like Hasbro decided like, well, we made a mistake by killing off Optimus Prime, so we're
Right.
gonna bring him back for the kids. And they brought him back, and they actually brought him back. Weirdly, but they brought back a newer toy of Optimus Prime, which was done differently from the 80s one. Then when they went into the early 90s, they had with the Motormaster Optimus Prime, which was pretty cool and everything. So I think they kind of fixed themselves with killing off Optimus Prime and bringing him back, because he was like the main hero. Everybody kind of like, oh, Optimus Prime.
he was like the face of the,
he was the face of the Autobots. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, I guess it's not Transformers as a whole, but like when I think Transformers, the first thing I think of is Optimus Prime.
Yep.
Yeah, that was just it was wacky, but this movie had like a lot of funny parts in it. There were a lot of parts that's still kind of caught me by surprise. Again, the voice acting in it was really, really well done. And I want it's funny because I was about to say they went full 80s on it, but it's not like they knew any different. I mean, it just was the 80s. And that's just how the style of film was made for that time. And of course there's a lot of films that were made in the 80s that now it's like I kind of look at them in a different light, but this is one of those films that really it's like, no, this embodies the 80s in a very well done way, and it almost makes me jealous that I didn't get to grow up in that time period to see that. So it was good. It was really good.
So like Mike had brought up the fact, and you talked about the voice actor. So like they brought in Leonard Nimoy, which everybody remembers him from Star Trek. He did the voice for Galvatron. Judd Nelson, which everybody remembers him from The Breakfast Club. He did the voice did the voice for Rodimus Prime and Hot Rod.
Yes. Okay, so Judd Nelson, I don't know why I'm thinking of this other guy, but now I know who we're talking about.
Yep.
So, okay, I had a different actor pictured. So when I'm hearing his voice, I'm like, dude, this dude sounds so familiar, but I can't match it to his face. But now I understand who we're talking about.
And then of course Orson Welles, if anybody remembers anything about Orson Welles, Orson Welles narrated the old War of the Worlds, which was a radio program that everybody thought was real, and
Yes.
it was. His voice was just really well. So when he filmed Transformers the movie, they got him to do voice. He was really bad, poor in health, and his voice was just really bad. And he voiced the robot, the Monster Planet, which was Unicron. They actually went back and said, we really can't use his voice. They're like, he's just not going to work. And they already had the voice recording, so they actually took his voice in real life and synthesized it to make it sound more of a godly presence almost. Like his voice, like he was the Monster Planet, so they gave him this like more of a bass and synthesized voice, which was very eerie when he talked, especially when he was talking to Galvatron. So when they changed it to that pretty much sold that character. And sadly, after this movie came out, right before he came out, Orson Welles had already passed away. So this was actually Orson Welles' last movie that he did with his voiceover. So I think the movie still holds up today. I think for animated standards, I think it was just so well done. Even though they used it as a marketing premise, I think the music and the action in the movie and just the animation itself was just so detailed.
Right. And to bring up, just like you said, like even though it was used for a marketing kind of ploy for toys, I like that there was still heart in it. Like I could tell that the animator spent a lot of time, and like they didn't just like do half the work. Like they really went all in to make this, even though they probably knew from the people higher up. It was like, hey, we're here to sell toys. This is why we're making this movie. Like a bunch of dudes in suits that were like, we don't care that, this transforms into a car or plane or a helicopter. Like we just want to sell toys to these kids. But these the art directors knew better, and they were like, well, we still want to make a good movie, and the voice actors were like, okay, well, we still want to give our best performances, and you can tell, you can hear that like when and see it on screen, which I love, because sometimes it kind of brings me back to like I'd say the weird era of every film that came out somehow became a video game in like the 2003 to 2008 era of gaming, where you have Thor come out and then all of a sudden Thor is a video game, and then you have Iron Man come out and somehow Iron Man's but like they're just cash grab, like there's no effort to be made whatsoever on them, and so I really appreciate that they got together and they're like, well, we're still going to make a great product. And so to me, it balances out the kind of greediness.
And growing up being a Nintendo kid and everything, that he never actually made a Nintendo original NES Transformer game. There was none BML. So the only original Transformer game I remember when it came out when I was young was the Beast Wars game that came out for original PlayStation.
Yeah,
and then that was popular at the time.
Was Beast Wars part of Transformers?
It was part of the Transformers lore. It actually kind of like it. So it was the Predacons and the Maximals is basically, so it was like a rearrange from the Autobots and Decepticons. So it was Primals were the good guys, and the Predacons were like the Destructicons.
Oh, okay.
So and then that was an animated. It was a computer animated cartoon, and it was real popular. And then once Michael Bay kind of reprised the Transformers into a live action movie with then these games started to come back out. So I think Activision had a few of them, and there's a handful of them that are actually really good. And there's some that is hard to find, but I think some of the newer ones, like the Battle for Cybertron games by Activision, are actually really good. They're ones that I played on 360.
Maybe we'll have to find them and play them live.
Yeah.
Which, if you didn't catch, we played some GoldenEye on Better With Sound Twitch the other day, and another little shameless plug for our YouTube channel, which should also be up by now, that has clips from that, so be sure to check that out. Yeah, I thought it was a great movie. I think we kind of talked about it before we started recording, but I think maybe the next time we do another movie night, we're going to do the first live-action Ninja Turtles film.
It was an independent film that I watched.
I still can't believe that's so crazy to me, because even though it doesn't, like you look at it in today's light, you're like, oh man, there's so many issues with this. But, if you just get rid of like what we know about film and things today, it is such a well-made film, and you hear independent and you're like, how did they even do that?
It was one of those ones that I think it capitalized on the 90s when the MC Hammer was still big, because MC Hammer was part of the soundtrack for that.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, like part 2 was, Vanilla Ice. People during that genre of time were like, oh, I remember MC Hammer singing the song in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie, and the amount of money they spent making that film with the animatronics and the people and the costumes and stuff. It was just so well done. It was, it brought to life the cartoon that we were so known for, that we enjoyed watching on Saturdays or during the week or whatever. So I actually talked to Mike, and I said he said, yeah, I've seen it before. I said we should do that. We should compare that to what the Ninja Turtles are now.
Oh yeah, and I mean I don't think I've caught up with Ninja Turtles since I mean it was a really good animated, but I want to say it was like the new or gosh I can't remember what it was, but basically it was like a grittier take. Like it was still for kids, so it wasn't that gritty, but it had like a newer animation, and it's from like maybe
Yeah.
15-ish years ago or something. So it's not like the new Nickelodeon one. It was still kind of when it was on Fox maybe, but it was kind of a older teenage version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's funny because I've gone back and watched the old original series,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of hard to watch because I'm like, man, there's not really a lot going on. Maybe because as a kid, it's just like, ooh, flashing colors and little jokes here and there. But I also didn't realize that like the use of weapons and everything had to be cut back a lot too. So that'd be really interesting to just get into when we do that. But I still Michelangelo fan here. Mikey's one of my favorites. Although low key, Leo, probably before Mikey was my favorite, was always like my favorite.
Raphael was probably my favorite since he was just so stubborn and strong headed. And I'd say Donatello would be my second since he was such a geek. He was always in making gadgets or doing something. It was pretty cool.
I gotta say, like right now, and I doubt she'll ever listen to this, but I want to shout out my friend Summer from work because I think she is the only person I know whose favorite Ninja Turtle is Donatello. Like, not even joking, like unironically. So shout out to Summer for like being the one fan of Donatello out there. Even though she's absolutely wrong about that, but he was okay, but he was definitely fourth on the list. I'd even pick that. I remember when the Power Rangers and the Ninja Turtles crossed over, there was a gal that was on their team and she was light blue. I can't remember her name. But they had like a crossover, like live action episode, with the 5 Ninja Turtles. And so it was the 4 original plus her. Man, I really wish I could remember her name because I don't even think it had like a fancy like old timey like it was like Sarah or something. And then the Power Rangers. Now watch, people are gonna be like, no way it wasn't. Like she had a great name and they're gonna totally correct me. But I'd love to hear it. Send it to our email or on Facebook. But I remember watching that episode and I kept thinking, I was like, who is this? I was like, they just kind of introduced her as if she's always been around, and then we never saw her again. But it was only for that crossover because I think it was 5 Power Rangers and they wanted to have 5 Ninja Turtles. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she is part of the series somehow. I'd love to hear about it. So if you know who I'm talking about or that episode that I'm talking about, let me know.
I remember seeing some ad, but I don't remember much of it.
Yeah,
so.
she wore like a teal color.
Yeah,
so that was like her like her thing. And which I'm glad that they didn't do something like oh, she's pink or whatever. But at least it was a tad bit progressive for the time. But yeah, it was just really interesting because I remember seeing that and being like, oh, they added a 5th member, and then I didn't know what her special ability was, and then I never heard about her ever again.
So you were talking about like characters. So in the original cartoon, as it progressed through the Ninja Turtle cartoon, so they ended up introducing a character which is still to my day one of my favorite secondary characters ever. It was a samurai rabbit, and he went by Yasagi Yojimbo.
Yes,
it was the Japanese word for bunny or rabbit, so they went with that. And he had these this blue gi on with the samurai black pants, and he had a sword, and he talked like he was a samurai, and I thought it was the coolest thing, and they kind of wrote more comics with him in it. He would come sometimes to help out the turtles, and I thought it was the most coolest character ever. And I wish they would have done a little bit more with it because I think
my gosh, that unlocked a memory for sure because I remember that. And I can't believe I forgot to mention, but Casey Jones. Casey Jones was, and I don't remember exactly when he came into play. I don't know if it was in the original series or maybe the series that came after.
Yeah.
But I mean, Casey was just awesome.
They had him play him off like the character in the old 80s, like he talked like Clint Eastwood or like Jack Nicholson.
I loved his golf bag full of weapons.
Yeah.
And it's just a baseball bat, a golf club, and like whenever he used one, he'd throw it away. So he'd use like a hockey stick, and then he'd throw it on the ground, and then he'd use baseball bat and throw it on the ground. And I just it was like he had an endless just golf bag of equipment. was
very
awesome.
very unique character creating and everything. I love the original Ninja Turtles. They were just part of my life growing up as a kid. So
Right. I mean, to be an '80s kid, I don't know. I mean,
yeah,
listen, I was a '90s kid. I mean, I guess I was born in the '90s, so I grew up, the lifespan of the '90s, and um, that to me, I feel like was a trip,
yeah.
mostly because I feel like the '90s was kind of like when nothing happened. Like it was almost like the nothingness of the world. Like the '80s hype of video games have already like come and passed, and the hair metal bands are like coming out. I guess we had punk,
Yeah.
or garage bands,
So
styles.
the style that I grew up in the '80s, stonewashed jeans, and I had high tops that were British Knights. That were this, every kid at school had British Knights. I wore those, and stonewashed jeans and stonewashed jackets. People would wear those. That was a popular thing. I had 3 or 4 pairs of stonewashed jeans when I was in school.
That's hilarious.
It was just a popular thing, and I felt cool wearing them.
Yeah, at least. Oh my gosh, you never had Jankos, did you?
No, I did
Oh,
not.
okay. That is a phase that thankfully I was too young to understand, and I I missed out on that one completely. But yeah, and we did want to keep this episode a little shorter, just because it is getting late where we are right now. But I'm betting that we've already covered at least 30 minutes. I can't see how much we've covered, but if I had to guess, we've already covered.
So I was
30
thinking
minutes,
the next topic, and I was going to see it hit with you. So I
Yeah.
was going to say Disney and video games. Like, there's been so many games based off of Disney
yeah.
cartoons or movies and stuff, and I just thought we can maybe bring in I got a couple that in my collection that I loved, that I played dearly, that came out during the time, and we can go over that.
I would love that. Honestly, what's interesting about that is that if you know me, you know that I can't recall ever seeing a lot of the Disney classics. Like, I've never fully seen Aladdin. I've never fully seen Lion King. Jungle Book, things like that. Like, I've never seen those, at least just parts here and there, or if a clip in a YouTube video or something like that. I understand the story, but I've never actually seen the film. But I have played a lot of the video game adaptations, and they're really good. Some of them are super good.
They are.
Lion King, I think specifically, I
Lion King
remember
was
being
really
really
good.
well, and Aladdin.
Aladdin was really good.
My neighbor growing up, he had a Sega. He pretty much had every system that was better than the ones that we owned, because he was his family, was wealthier, and he very much enjoyed showing off his newer, like, oh, well, you have the original Nintendo. My parents bought me the Super Nintendo. Oh, you still have the Super Nintendo? My parents got me the N64. That was that kid. But he had the Sega, not Sega Master System, the
Genesis.
Yeah, Sega Genesis. Thank you. Oh my gosh, that's so embarrassing that but he had the Sega Genesis when that first came out, and then we went over there to hang out, and then he was just like, oh yeah, he's like, you could play Aladdin, I guess. And I over there, and I'm just like, I'm like, however old I was really, really young, and just playing Aladdin, and I remember being like, this is the best visuals I've ever seen in my life.
I got the Aladdin for Sega Genesis. I also got a couple Nintendos, DuckTales and Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, were fond memories that I played because I used to watch the cartoons when I was little.
Yeah.
So I can definitely bring those over. And
that would be fantastic. I feel bad. It's funny because I'm still a collector. I love collecting. But Jeff has kind of wiped me out of my collection so far. So pretty much anytime I get some really good stuff, it just goes to him. So my show and tell consists of what I own. So I'll leave up a lot of show and tell to Jeff for a while until once springtime hits, though, I'll be digging through garages and attics and getting my collection back up and going again. But right now it's a little bit of a dry season.
Right. So I think we had talked before, and I think we talked just on the first meeting we had, that it would be kind of cool during garage season with spring and summer that we could spend a weekend, maybe sail around, and then.
Oh my gosh, I forgot we talked about that.
And then we can do our podcast, and then we can kind of go over what we picked up or whatever.
Yes. So. And then just again, before I forget, I wanted to do a shout out for a couple channels that I watch, and you can do the same as well. Just if you're really big into collecting, Metal Jesus Rocks, check out his YouTube channel. The Immortal John Hancock, and then there's John Riggs. So those 3 guys I check out on YouTube, and they're all friends, so they know each other. And then there's I think it's just Reggie. I can't remember his last name, but
Oh,
if you look
yeah.
up Reggie Collector, you'll see him. But those 4 people I watch.
I watch a lot of. I do watch a lot of them, and I also watch Retro Rick. He goes around.
Oh,
and does,
yeah,
he
Retro
goes around
Rick.
to like pawn shops and flea markets and stuff, and he'll go through and he collects about a little bit of everything. So he'll do like action figures, toys, video cassettes, and he also does a lot of game. He real good, real knowledgeable. He's hit a couple cons, and he'll go around and show you what he has a list that he goes through, and he goes and tries to complete his Nintendo collection of stuff. And he has his own store now, which is really cool because he'll do some of his shows from his store, and it's really cool. So it's
That's awesome.
Another person you can check out too.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, I think we'll probably call it for that, so it doesn't get too much later. Because as soon as we start getting into Ninja Turtles, is like, oh my gosh, I could go into this rant, but we'll save it.
Yep.
But man, great movie. Check out Transformers, the movie, if you haven't seen it. Watch it with some buddies or some close friends, because I feel like it's definitely one. I mean, you probably enjoy it on your own, but it's definitely one of those that I'm glad that I had somebody here to kind of like bounce off, like, oh my gosh, like, can you believe they did that? Or like, oh, they used the same animation twice there, whatever. It's just like fun to kind of do that. But yeah, great movie. Check it out. Awesome work to everybody that made it.
And if you're a big person likes heady 80s air band metal, definitely check out the soundtrack from Transformers the
Yes.
movie, and definitely take a listen. It's 80s, but it's this music in there. Stan Bush does a couple songs. There's a couple other kind of not well known metal bands that have this great music through that whole movie. So definitely check it out.
And then also Weird Al. Weird Al is in the
Weird
movie.
Al has one song in the movie that's played during one of the fight scenes, so definitely
And
check it out.
What a wild goes from fight scene to dance scene, and you're like, what is happening? But that's Weird Al. That's what's
Yeah.
going on. But Roxy's out to let us know that it's time.
Yep.
But that'll be it for episode 4. Be sure to check us out next week when we talk about Disney gaming. Jeff's gonna bring in some really cool stuff, and then who knows, maybe we'll be able to stream it. So
Cool.
be on the lookout for that. And then
Awesome.
again, check out Con on the 22nd of April here
Right.
in Columbia, Missouri. Stony Creek Hotel. Reach out to us if you have any information or that you want more information about that. And if you want to meet us, we'll be there. So
And definitely reach out to us on if there's any other topics you would like us to discuss, or any movies that you think would be fun to discuss, or even games or anything like that, or toys. I grew up with a lot of toys as a kid, so I'd be more than willing to come in and just talk about whatever. So just let us know.
yeah, sounds great. All right, Jeff. Well, thanks for being here, man.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah. And remember, guys, collect, play, repeat.